There are two books in the Bible that are named for women. Ruth is one of the books, and Esther is the other book named for a woman. I kept looking when I was a kid for a book named Russell, but there never seemed to be one. Do any of you have an Esther in your family? Does anybody have an Esther? Helen, you do? Oh, you got some Esthers. Does anybody have a Vashti? Vashti? Evelyn, it comes to the 9 o'clock service. Her grandmother was named Esther, and her great-grandmother was named Vashti, which I thought was, a fascinating kind of thing. How many of us know the story of Vashti in the book of Esther? 2 or 3? Yeah, you guys can't. You don't count. This is one of those stories that gets buried. It just gets buried in the biblical narrative. People don't bring it out because it's dangerous. It's a dangerous story, dangerous memory. You might have people in your family, I suspect that all of us do, have people in our families where they were looked at as like the oddball, or they were dangerous. Something was up with them. You might have had a grandfather or an uncle who was a bootlegger. I don't know. I've heard that. You might have had an aunt that got pregnant somewhere along the way and she was sent off to a girls' school. You might have had, whatever it might have been, you have some stories in your family that didn't naturally come out. Do you have any of those stories? I always wanted to know those stories. Those were the interesting stories. Those were the fascinating stories when I was a kid, and they still are. Whenever I hear a story now that my mom and dad tell about family, I think, I have never heard that story, and I want to hear more about it. I want to hear more about that story. This story today about Queen Vashti, moving into the story of Queen Esther, is a story that is our family story, but it has been buried under layers and layers and layers of patriarchy, okay? So today, I'm going to peel a few of those layers off, and we're going to hear a little bit about the story of Queen Vashti, the queen right before Queen Esther, and then we'll move it into Queen Esther. So, this book is about 10 chapters long. It takes maybe 15 minutes to read it, maybe 10 minutes if you're a faster reader. And it was written around 160 of the Common Era. It's the last book of the Bible, of the Hebrew Bible, that was written. And then there was the intertestamental times, and the New Testament was written. So it was late. It was late. And this is the way it unfolded, and it was telling a story that happened 350 years previously. So you know that some of the conversations are made up, right? In fact, you know that maybe the whole story has a little bit of myth and legend all mixed together. This is the way it happened. This happened in the days of King Xerxes. The same Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia, all through the Middle East. In those days, when King Xerxes sat on his royal throne in the citadel of Susa, Babylon, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his officials and ministers. The army of Persia and Media and the nobles and governors of the provinces were present while he displayed the great wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and pomp of his majesty for many days, 180 days in all. I told the Faith on Fire people before, and Fane, you would know this. This sounds like a 180-day party at college. That's not right. So when those days were completed, the king gave for all the people present in the capital city, both great and small, a banquet lasting for another 7 days. So 187 days of revelry and parties. Furthermore, at that time, Queen Vashti gave a banquet for the women in the palace of King Xerxes. Now, the reason that it says that is that at that point in time, the women were separated from the men. And so Queen Vashti decided they've been having a party for all that time. We're going to have a party for the women. That's what happened. On the 7th day of that party, of that short party, the one after the 180 days, when the king was merry with wine. What do you think that means? There we go. When the king was merry with wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who attended him to bring Queen Vashti before the king wearing the royal crown in order to show the people and the officials her beauty, for she was fair to behold. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command, and at that the king was enraged and his anger burned within him. She's not coming? For crying out loud. According to the law, what is to be done, they asked, to Queen Vashti because she has not performed command of King Xerxes conveyed by the eunuchs? Then one of the leaders said in the presence of the king, not only has Queen Vashti done wrong to the king, but also to all the officials and all the peoples who are in all the provinces of the king. For this deed of the queen will be made known to all women. This deed of the queen will be made known to all the women. Now we got trouble. Right here in River City. With a capital T. And that rhymes with P, and that stands for pool, my friends. Oh, there was trouble. And so, what happened after that was that they put Queen Vashti away. They sent her away. It doesn't say that they killed her, but they sent her away into isolation. Now, there was a Jewish person in the citadel in the kingdom whose name was Mordecai, and he had a daughter, and her daughter's name was Esther. Mordecai had saved the king from assassination, and so the king and all the people were trying to figure out who's going to be the new queen, and so they brought all these virgins in, and one of them was named Esther, and Mordecai was her uncle. So Esther was taken into the king's palace and put in custody of one of the people, and she was made the queen eventually. At some point in time, in the story as it unfolds, one of the people who was mad at Mordecai and mad at the Jews wanted to kill all the Jews in the kingdom. 75,000 Jews would be killed. And Esther, which is the story that was in the song, Esther says, I need to go talk to the king about this to prevent him from that. And so she does. She goes into the king uninvited, which is punishable by death. But she takes it on herself and she says, these are my people, I don't want you to kill them. And it so happens that she saves the Jewish people, 75,000 people. And right now, in March, I think it's March 19th this year, there will be a celebration. It's called Purim, or Purim, which is a festival for the Jewish people, and it is a celebration when they were not annihilated by the Persian kingdom. Now, through the years, we know different times when the Jews were threatened with annihilation, don't we? The latest time, the Holocaust, yes. And now, even in these last few years, there has been different groups who've said that they've wanted to wipe the Jews off the face of the earth, right? And so we have walls and things built around Israel to protect the Jewish people, yes? So this story that is an ancient one still goes on. It still is going on. So recently I watched Band of Brothers. Do you know that? Do you know that television show, Band of Brothers? It's about a company in World War II. It's called Easy Company, and they trace them from the time that they land on Normandy all the way through to the end of the war. Near the end of that It's based on true story. Stephen Ambrose wrote it. But at the end of the war, things were closing down. And the war was winding to an end. And they're in Germany. And Easy Company is given an order to cross this river and to take back live prisoners. Very end of the war. And so the Americans were on one side and the Germans were on the other side of this short, small river. And the Americans went across and they took 15 men and they went across and one of the men died in this episode and in what happened. And then they came back over with their live prisoners and they presented them to the colonel and he said, "Great, thank you for doing the work you did," etc. And then the lieutenant colonel or the general said, "This was really looking good for me that you did this. So let's do it again tonight. Second night in a row. Let's do the whole thing again." And the colonel said, "Yes." And then he gathered the men together who were going to go across the river that second night in a row, who had lost one of their friends the previous night. And he said, he gathered them together and he gave the order, which was what the general had told him. And then he said, "But I'm going to give you another order. And that order is you just go and have a good night's sleep." It was this moment when he said no. I could have been court-martialed, could have been shot for it, right? But in his mind, he thought, this is not appropriate. This is not what we need to do at the end of this war, to shine somebody's medals up. And so here's the thing with Queen Vashti saying no. It's probably the first time in history that someone stood up to that king to say no. And what feminist scholars are saying now is that Queen Esther never would have gone in when she wasn't supposed to unless she had known the story of Queen Vashti saying no. Because when she stepped in before the king, she could have been killed, yes? But instead she said, "No, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this thing." So for me and for us, I think there's this piece that we can take in that says there are times when the Christian faith says you have to say yes to God and yes to Jesus and yes to the love and yes to law and yes to everything. But this story, which has been buried, because not many of us know the story of Queen Vashti, says that no, sometimes it is right to say no. Sometimes it is right to say no. That's a lesson that I'm going to learn. I far too often say yes. And then when I find myself in the place where I'm at, I think, why in the world did you ever say yes, Rusty? And so for us, sometimes it's time to say no. Now, one last thing. I give you this one last message that I have. Last night, I got to meet with the members of Holy Grounds, which is our college student age, and some older. There's some people in their 30s, so 20s and 30s, about 7 or 8 of them. I got to meet with them. And we were talking about different things. And the question that we were dealing with last night was, well, what does it take to be a good person? How are we trying to figure out what it is to be a good person? When we talked about that, and we talked about politics, we talked about some of the things that we do, which we know that it's not good. For example, I got in my car today, I drove, I used gas, I put pollution into the air. I know that that's not good. We all know that. But we are complicit because the world is complex. Yes? It's complex. The things that we think are innocent sometimes are not. And so we talked about all that, and we talked about politics, and the conversation ranged, you know, and then at one point in the conversation, this young woman who's just brilliant, she's just brilliant. They all are. She said, it seems like the world is terrible right now. Has it always been this way? And I didn't know what to say. Because I think it is terrible right now, sometimes what we see. And I said, I know that we, my generation, have not left you a world that looks very good. And then, for the first time, and I don't do this very often, I was able to say something that was in the Bible. And I said, maybe you were born for such a time as this. Could it be that you were born for such a time as this? I'm hoping it is so. When we give this world over to the next generation, we hope that they will meet the challenges and the problems that they have the best way that they know how, and each generation has to do that. And we see some of the things that we've done that have helped the world come along. Women in Congress, women in leadership, that's one thing. Racism, which has been beaten down, but we see it starting to grow in different ways in the country. And so I'm just hoping that the next generation, Fana, your generation, yes, that you were born for such a time as this, you will take some of these problems that we've given and do something with them. Well, we're going to do the hymn. Amen? Amen, my friends.
And I just want to give Faith on Fire up here a little introduction before we start. There it is. I want to give Faith on Fire a little introduction before we start. We look a little smaller today. That's because we have 7 band members absent. So I didn't want you to worry. All 15 of us will be back in March. It just happens to be a holiday weekend, right? So family plans, college visits, there's a lot of sports tournaments going on. So I'm really proud of this group because they rallied and they put some music together for you today for service. And it's going to be a treat. And I really appreciate them. And I just want to introduce them. We got Maggie here and Barrett, Erica, Julia, Ella, Alexandra, Megan, and Andy. And what I want you to know about them and most of our band members is they play 1 or 2 instruments and sing. So what you normally see them doing, they can do more. So we kind of switched it up today. So you're like, oh my gosh, that's, you're going to see them doing different things than you've seen them do before. Now, the only thing is we have 2 drummers, and they both were gone today. So we did get a little substitute. And since he's a kid at heart, we figured he was warmly welcomed. We've got John Lee, director of Faith on Fire, down on the drums. So he could keep the beat today. Thank you, John. Right, guys? Yeah. And I just want to let you know that this is a wonderful music ministry for youth, and our membership is open all year long. So if you are a youth or you know any youth that would like to join us, please have them come talk to one of these guys or John and I, and we're happy to explain to you how we do things each week and for worship on Sunday. So to start off worship today, we thought we would honor Black History Month, and we're going to do a gospel piece. And what probably a lot of you know is most recording artists will credit their home church as their music debut. Most people start singing and playing in church and with lyrics of faith. So here at the Methodist Church, we know we're music connoisseurs. And maybe one day, one of these guys will be at the Grammys. That'd be pretty cool. But in addition to that, there's more to the music than just being musical. There is the message. And these guys really take this seriously, and they feel every song has a soul. And the lyrics can change a person's perspective, change their day, give them hope, and really send them down a path of faith. So we pray this morning that our first number, called All My Hope, will connect with you. Thank you.
I've been held by the Savior. I felt fire from above. I've been down to the river. I ain't the same, a prodigal return. All my hope is in Jesus. Thank God my yesterday's gone. All my sins are forgiven. I've been washed by the blood. I'm no stranger to prison. I've worn shackles and chains. I've been freed and forgiven. Yes, I have. I'm not going back. I'll never be the same. That's why I sing. All my hope is in Jesus. Thank God my yesterday's gone. All my sins are forgiven. I've been washed by the blood. There's a kind of thing that just breaks you down. Breaks you down to your knees. Yes, Lord. God, I've been broken more than a time or two. Yes, Lord. Then He picked me up and showed me the way to the promised land. Come on and sing. All my hope is in Jesus. Thank God my yesterday's gone. Hey, all my a young woman who became the wife of the Persian king. Shortly after they were wed, Esther learned of a plot by the king's advisor to destroy the Jews in Persia. Esther risked her own death by marching into the king's court without being summoned, and informed the king of the advisor's plot. Esther's life was spared, and she rescued her people with the king's help. The song born for this is about Esther's bravery and how she stood up for human rights against all odds, because she knew it was God's plan and he would protect her.
Feels like I've been holding my breath, trying to still my restless heart. Everything hangs on my next step, finding my name, playing my part. I found shelter underneath his crown, I found favor inside his eyes. Rock this boat, I just might drown. Honesty seems to come with a price. There's a time to hold your tongue, time to keep your head down. There's a time, but it's not now. Sometimes you gotta go on it while it is. Sometimes you gotta speak when you don't have the floor. Sometimes you gotta move when everybody else says you should stay. No way, no, not today. You gotta ask if you want an answer. Sometimes you gotta stand apart from the crowd. Long before your heart could run the risk, you were born for this, born for this, born for this, born for this. I'm leaning on the walls before me, my father's dreams. I'm standing on the top of the shoulders, calling the one delivering me. There's a time to hold your tongue, time to keep your head down. There's a time, but it's not now. Sometimes you gotta